Hey guys, what's going on? It's If You Have to Pick Three. I'm Matt.
And I'm Zach.
If you haven't joined us for one of these lists before, it sucks to be you, but you're here now, so thank you so much for listening. What we do here is we pick a topic, and then in that topic, we each have to pick a top three list. We fight it out to see who has the most in those top three lists, and here we are. So, Zach, what are we discussing today?
Well, Matt, ready to feel old?
Go on.
Another decade has flown by.
Another one bites the dust.
And we are nearing the end of the 2010s.
That can only mean one thing.
An odd decade that we're not even entirely sure of pronouncing correctly. The 2010s. But
so weird.
That means that everyone is now debating what was the best album of the past decade. So why should we be no different?
Exactly.
Today,
#on trend.
#on trend. And today we are going to be discussing the three albums that we think best define the 2010s, that are just superb and stellar, and what we think that will still be remembered as classic masterpieces for decades to come. So, Matthew.
Zachary.
Would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first?
I'll go first this time.
Alrighty, well, have fun.
All right. So, number one on my list. I've been saying this for a very, very long time, it feels like, but it could have only been 9 years at this point. The album came out back in 2011, and at that time, I was saying that this album was probably one of the finest sounding recorded albums of the last 15 years. So, 15 years from 2011. And throughout the tens, if you have it, it's still really weird to say that.
Yeah. That's gotta be a better name.
I know, but the 20s is going to be so much better.
The swinging 20s. Anyway.
So back in 2011, this was an incredible album. It was my top album of the year back in 2011. Obviously, we didn't have a podcast then. Didn't even know you in 2011.
I'm sure you're a fine fella.
Yeah, I know. I had my swagger about me still, and now here we are.
So what was the album? I'm dying to know.
This album, it was put out by the Foo Fighters, and it was Wasting Light.
Okay.
I honestly also believe that this was one of the albums that kind of led to a revitalization of analog. And Wasting Light, it sounds phenomenal. And what they did was they also took the recording tapes and they cut them up and they gave them to people inside of certain, I believe it was inside of certain vinyls that you could purchase at the time. Mm-hmm. So that was really cool to get a piece of the mastering tape to the album. But if you haven't listened to this album ever, or even listened to it on vinyl, you're doing yourself a great disservice. Like, I still believe it's one of the finest recorded albums. Now it's of the last 20 some odd years.
I would also recommend watching the Foo Fighters Back and Forth documentary, because half of it was them looking at the past, and then the rest of the movie was actually them recording Wasting Life.
Yes.
And it was actually really fascinating to watch them record that album, because you can tell that it was a lot more, not necessarily relaxed, but definitely they were hard at work while still having fun.
Yes, and they were at Dave Grohl's house, like in the pool, and just having a good old time recording the album. It was a good documentary. I remember watching that now. And I mean, this album, if you haven't heard it because, it's the Foo Fighters, they've been recording the same albums for forever, this is different. It sounds different. It feels different. It's a one-of-a-kind album.
All right, so what's next? Number
2, we're going to go with... back in 2013, I remember watching the Grammys. This is when I still watched the Grammys. This is kind of toward the end of when I actually cared about the Grammys. But be that as it may, album of the year, record of the year for 2013, that according to them was Daft Punk. I was like, they're still around? They're still making music? What's so great about this album? Why is this thing such a big thing? And then they did a performance on stage of it. That they did, what the hell song did they do?
Lucky?
Get Lucky, yeah. So they did Get Lucky, and I was like, okay, interesting. So I decided to give it a listen. Holy crap. I can see why it was the album of the year in 2013. This is such a great, I don't want to say it's an electronic album. I don't want to say it's a pop album. It's a genre blending journey. Mm-hmm. From start to finish. You've got a lot of songs that have great instrumentation to it. You have a lot of songs that just have that traditional Daft Punk weirdness to them. You have a song where Artist by the name of Giorgio. He's an EDM artist. He actually talked about his life story on the beginning of the track, and then they go into this like electronic track, and it's an interesting track because it's a guy telling his story and how he kind of came to be, and you want to listen to it. It's not just something to skip because there's a whole track at the end of it, and it's really cool. And then they go into one of the songs that I just kind of heard on my own before I even listened to the whole album, Motherboard, which just has this great feel to it. It's just such an amazing record from start to finish. And listening to it on vinyl, I mean, you don't think digital would translate well to vinyl, but it sounds amazing on vinyl. And once again, I think reviving that, the Foo Fighters kind of made it a little bit more popular to listen to something on vinyl after that Wasting Light album. So that's number two.
Second pick. Third?
Number three, just recently came out, 2019. It kind of puts an end cap to a larger story that started out even before the 2010s. Tool released 10,000 Days in 2006. So many stories, so many rumors, so many things transposed in the media throughout the 2010s about when Tool was going to release a new album. And here we are in 2019. It's finally happened. And while a lot of bands don't live up to the hype and they don't live up to, what people are expecting out of them, Tool does it in spades.
Wow. Well, a little spoiler alert for what your
little
top 5 list of 2019 is.
I mean, if that wasn't on anybody's top of 2019, I think you're sadly mistaken. However, I think it's a perfect way to kind of cap off a lot of things, with Maynard and Tool and all of that, because in 2018 we were getting little spoilers here and there of like riffs that Tool came out with, and that the guys, might be potentially releasing something. But then there was, talks back in like 2015 and 2016 that they might be doing something. And, it was just it's longer than a decade, but for the 2010s, it was this decade-long talk of, is Tool going to do something? And still to this day, one of my favorite stats is it took us a shorter amount of time to go from Earth to Pluto and back than it took for Tool to release the brand new album Fear Inoculum. So if you haven't listened to this one yet, it is definitely worth a pickup, a listen, especially if you can get your hands on one of the special limited edition ones with I'm not even going to say it because we have a video that we did of the unboxing of the limited edition.
So check it out before you spend a ton of money on eBay for it.
Yeah,
because I think even the second reproduction of it is already sold out of it too.
Yeah, it's insane what this thing actually has in it. So go look at our video. If you want to go spend the money afterwards, go for it. Otherwise, you saw,
or just watch it a million times. Our video,
that'd be great.
Help us with our views. Thank you.
Smash that like button.
Yeah, smash it, bro. So that's your 3.
Top 3 is the Foo Fighters' Wasting Light, Daft Punk's Random Access Memories, and Tool's Fear Inoculum.
All righty. Very cool.
What say you be your 3?
What say me? Well, so I kind of tried to look at different genres of the year because I think that's what made the 2010s so interesting, was that in a time where it wasn't just one style. I mean, you could argue that hip hop and electronic was the most popular of the decade.
In a world where hip hop and electronic have taken over.
But at the same time, I think it was a genre that so many different, or was a decade where so many genres were able to kind of get their own spotlight, where people were able to maybe go down a deeper rabbit hole of music that wasn't necessarily in the mainstream. And then because of the fan push, it became huge. So I want to start off my list by acknowledging what I think might be the best alt rock, alt pop, art rock album of the decade, St. Vincent's self-titled album. She is one of the most unique artists, I think, of the past 2 decades even. She's got such a beautiful voice. She's got such a unique approach to guitar playing. And I think her self-titled album that came out in 2014, really, she went from critical darling to putting in more pop elements into her sound and even more rock elements while still staying true to herself. It's I think if you look at listen to songs like Birth in Reverse, like it has a little bit of a rock. I mean, it's funny because she credits her, I mean, she loves bands like Pantera and Tool. And upon first listen, you might not realize that she does. But then you listen closely to the way she writes a riff, and it's like, oh, I hear that little oomph behind her guitar sound.
Real quick to interrupt you, she actually had her own guitar made.
Yeah.
By Music Man, I believe, where it was more conducive for a female player because, hey, guess what? They've got breasts.
And she even said that, like, listen, it's uncomfortable to play most guitars.
Right. So she's got this really cool silhouette. It looks like almost like a dress if you haven't seen it.
And then she even takes songs like Digital Witness that really just blend in so many different genres and are still like earworm catchiness to it. She really is such a unique artist. And I think her self-titled album really was what kind of bridged between mainstream pop to still keeping herself in the art pop world as well. So I'm going to go with St. Vincent's self-titled album as the first one. Now, I mentioned that hip hop was definitely kind of reigned supreme during the 2010s, you could argue. And I think there was also a lot of amazing artists from that time that stepped up to show that hip hop could be more than just commercial sounding, that incorporates different kind of sounds, or even just gave an edge to it that made it exciting for fans who might not be huge hip hop fans. I myself, I'm not going to, sit back and tell you that I know everything about hip hop. I really don't. I still kind of know very little, and I'm discovering the genre more.
I like the golden age of hip hop. Anything current, I'm not a big fan of.
But there's some current artists that are really, I mean, there's artists like Kendrick Lamar who I think are pushing the boundaries so much and doing such a great job of being a voice of just their genres of the generation. However, I know you're all thinking I'm probably going to say To Pimp a Butterfly. I'm actually going to pick a different hip hop album. This one by you could argue, a super group of hip hop elitist. Run the Jewels, Mr. Killer Mike and Mr. LP. Their second album, Run the Jewels 2, I really think it's just a refreshing sound of hip hop. Two MCs who are just giving it their all. While there's amazing beats and there's just an element of danger, an element of excitement that I think hip hop and rap had been kind of missing, at least to someone like me. I mean, it really is just a great album and a great example of the boundaries that hip hop can take. And I mean, I also just love, I personally just love Run the Jewels' DIY mentality, to the way they approach marketing themselves, to the way that they, even just the way they go about producing and giving music away. I actually personally love Run the Jewels 3. That might be my favorite album of theirs, but I think Run the Jewels 2 is really the moment where they went from, we're just two friends, who come from our own backgrounds, decided to do an album. So we did Run the Jewels 1, to Run the Jewels 2 being like, no. We are the real deal. We are the true hip hop gods. Move out of the way unless if you want to be steamrolled by us. Like, that was just a huge statement. So I'm going with Run the Jewels 2 as my second pick.
Okay.
Now the third slot, there was a lot of different albums I wanted to pick here. I was even considering going with Wasting Light by Foo Fighters.
Really?
I was considering it.
Okay.
And I love that album. It's actually my favorite Foo Fighters album.
It's an amazing album.
But there was one particular album, one metal album.
Uh-oh. I think I know where you're going.
That I think was a big turning point. At first might have made some fans confused, but then ultimately really just proved that this band really is the future of metal, and why that they deserve to be held up as gods.
Okay.
Gojira.
Indeed.
And now I'm going with this album that might surprise some people, but I'm going with Magma, their 2016 latest release.
I don't think that's a surprise to anybody.
It's such a phenomenal album. There's definitely some more cleaner singing moments that might throw people off, but I think Metal Sucks, they did their own list of the top albums of the 2010s. And they really made a great point that while there was definitely some parts where they were experimenting, going a different direction of sound, it still sounded like Gojira. They are literally the most unique sounding metal band out there. And I mean, honestly, the song Stranded alone makes this album gold and the best metal. I would argue one of the best, if not the best metal album of the 2010s. It's just a pounding record that really proves that there's really no one like Gojira. the way that they mix kind of the Sepultura tribal energy with even to a certain degree, Lamb of God's like extremeness. Like they really are a leader in the metal scene right now that I would almost argue should be even bigger. They're the kind of band that makes me angry that there isn't a new album out yet. Like they're one of the few remaining bands out there that I'm like dying for new music for.
What year did that come out again?
2016. It's been
3 years.
Really long.
Yeah.
And we even just saw them recently opening for Slipknot, and they just bring it. Like, and this album, they just brought it to this album.
You can feel
they
that
could,
the
have
tide
repeated
is
themselves.
You feel like the tide is turning a little bit with them.
I mean, every time I see them live, I'm like, yeah, this is the future. But I think the moment that really kind of confirmed to me, like, no, they are the future. I saw them open for Slayer, and that really was the changing of guards. Like, you can just see that, like, all right, Gojira is the future. Goodbye, Slayer. I had a good run. It was like, to me, Gojira are the future Slayer of our generation. I don't know if they're ever going to be a Metallica, but then again, this album kind of proves like, listen, we can do some clean parts as well.
I think their metal. I don't think anybody's going to argue their metal chops. I just think that they need to put out another album after Magma to kind of solidify that they are this metal giant to be reckoned with. I
would argue this album did it.
Well,
I think this album
Flying
did it.
Whales was good. Or excuse me, from Mars, is it Mars to Sirius? I think that was the name of the album. Flying Whales was the song because they got a whale on the cover. That was a good album. This one, Magma, was an amazing album. You put out something else that's on par with Magma, and I think you're solidified. That's just me.
My three: Gojira, Magma, St. Vincent, self-titled album, and Run the Jewels 2.
Okay.
So now it comes the hard part. And I need you kind of just think about how I can maybe come to a peace treaty here.
Well, I will say this. You did say you were almost going to pick the Foo Fighters.
And trust me, I know Foo Fighters, I think, should be in that 3. I'm just trying to think of what I want to fight for.
Okay.
Among my list and what I would be okay with.
I will say that we should also include Gojira in that list because we agreed on that.
I'm okay with Gojira being in that list.
So now we got the problem of Run the Jewels, St. Vincent, Daft Punk, and Tool.
I'm gonna fight to say Daft Punk should not be on that list. I'm sorry. I think it's a good album, but
have you given it a chance?
I have, and I just don't think it's gonna. I think it already lost a lot of steam since it came out.
Okay.
I'm just thinking on albums that kind of will still be remembered for years to come.
And you feel that St. Vincent is there?
More so than Daft Punk.
I don't think so.
More so than Daft Punk. So how about this? So I think it should come between Run the Jewels versus Tool. I feel like it's too soon to say if the new Tool album is going to be, and spoiler alert, it's going to make my top 5 list as well of the year. But I think it's too soon to say if it's just because it's the brand's sparkly new toy that we're all obsessed with, or if it's just really that legendary of a memorable album. Whereas I feel like with Run the Jewels, it still makes a lot of people's list. It still stands out among the band's catalog.
I think the only reason, there's 2 reasons why I think Run the Jewels isn't gonna stand the test of time, because that industry and that scene changes so frequently.
I disagree so much. I think the album already has stood out. I would kind of just to save ourselves some headache. I know we hate to do ties, but I'd be willing to give it a tie between Run the Jewels and Tool.
I think that's the first time that anybody's ever said that.
I know, but I'd be willing to make that compromise.
I don't know. It's hard. I would honestly, just to save argument, I'm going to say, let's tie it, but
I say we do it a tie.
Fine. We'll tie it.
I think we should.
Okay.
So, to recap, the best albums of the 2010s, which we need to find a better name for.
Yes.
Get on it, hipster blogs. Foo Fighters, Wasting Light. Gojira's Magma. And a unique tie situation between Run the Jewels 2 and Tool's Fear in a Column.
Inoculum.
In a column.
We already got yelled at in the comments for calling it something wrong.
Chameleon.
I was going to wait for you to go there.
Yeah. So that's our picks. What do you think? Do you agree with us? Do you disagree with us? Do we leave an album off of it? Do we name an album that doesn't even deserve to be referenced again? Tell us in the comment sections of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, MySpace, Friendster, doves with letters attached to their legs.
Smoke signals.
So smoke signals, though that's bad for the environment, so don't do that. At Epic Footnote, tell us what you think, and thanks again for listening.
Vape clouds, bro.
Thanks again for listening, and we hope that you listen to us for a decade more.
Thanks, guys. Take it easy.